Call me. You want to get your
All right. We're getting ready for our next panel. Oh, I hate to cut you off. I hate cutting you off. Okay. Again, shout out to our DJ C Devon, bringing all the tunes during today's amazing summit. We are now going to go into our next panel, which is all things finance, wealth building, and planning. Okay. So I'd first like to welcome to the stage Tracy Williams, who will serve as today's moderator for financial wealth building and planning. I'd also like to say a special thank you to Mikhail Quarles from JP Morgan Chase, Advancing Black Pathways, the title sponsor for today's conversation and for today's summit. Gentlemen.
Great to be here. This panel has been amazing. The DJ is really doing her thing. I was jamming while she was just playing that last segment too. So I had the privilege of spending Monday night talking to these dynamic brothers about today's event. But so on our panel, we have Keith Beverly. He is the managing partner and chief investment officer at Grid 202 Partners. We have James Brown. He's the growth and development director of Northwestern Mutual Wealth Management Company. And I don't see our third panelist on here, but I want to get right into this. The panel so far has been great, going with a great conversation from Isaiah Thomas, moving to education, corporate America, and it's a great segue into our section. But each of you represent different industries and fields, and each of you have had various paths to success. In 1 minute or less, please share with us more about your professional journey in your current role.
James, go ahead.
All right, thanks, Keith. Good morning, everybody. And yes, it has been a outstanding panel so far, but my path was really driven by, my path to wealth management and financial planning was driven by three things. The first being personal fulfillment, having a direct impact on my community, and lastly, the ability to generate wealth for my family and others' families as well. My first 7 years out of business school, I spent in the field of consulting. And while I, met a ton of great people, learned a lot, those three boxes, none of them were checked. And that led me into wealth management, right? So not only being able to pick the right products for people, but help them identify goals as it relates to financial planning. And so that's direct impact, right? And then working with them to actually achieve those goals and create generational wealth for themselves and their families. So that's how I ended up at Northwestern Mutual for the past 9 years.
Yeah, and for me, Tracy, I've had a passion about finance and passion for the Black community ever since I was really in elementary school and middle school. So I bought my first stock when I was in high school, and I was hooked. And I've been really focused on how do we create, to James's point, how do we create generational wealth within the community? And there aren't many paths to do so as a financial advisor and to still work within the Black community. So that's been a passion of mine for my entire career. And I'm fortunate to be in a position where we can be independent with our clients and go anywhere that we need to in order to help them achieve their financial goals.
Absolutely. I actually want to.
And Tracy, I just want to make sure you guys can see me.
Charles, I'm sorry, he's from Chase. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
I didn't get you in the beginning. I wanted to make sure I got you in there.
Yeah, no problem. So, it's an interesting journey to be in a place where your family are entrepreneurs and realize that they don't have the access to information that they need to make good strategic decisions. And it's also the aspects of them knowing how to invest and make other decisions around how they manage wealth. And that's not where I came from. My family didn't have those answers. And so the opportunity to come into a financial institution and begin to learn that information and begin to share that information has been a lifelong journey. It's interesting because at some point I actually thought that I would leave JP Morgan Chase to go and create a company to do the work that we're doing currently. And so really excited to be about doing this work and providing those information and resources to minority-owned companies.
Thank you. Like I said, these are some dynamic brothers, and I had an opportunity to spend Monday evening with them. We may throw a pivot in there to one of these questions that we talked about, though, guys. But the second question I want to ask you, and I'm going to start with you again, Miguel. Wealth creation means different things to different people. In your opinion, and given your role, how would you define wealth?
Yeah, I use a very basic tenet, which is leaving a legacy for our children's children, right? And it's the whole idea that legacy is both in wealth, it's in finance, it's in assets, but it's also in the character and beliefs that you establish within your family structure and friend structure that creates an environment where people see, dream, believe, and work towards attaining new and inventive things. And it's those opportunities that allow people to be entrepreneurs and to go out and understand that they can acquire wealth. And as they build that wealth will provide for assets. It actually provides for better healthcare. It provides for all the other solutions in life that we all desire to have. And that generationally is what creates that impact. And so to me, that's what wealth is.
Gotcha. We're going to work our way backwards. And Keith, if you can give your answer to the same question.
Yeah, to me, wealth comes down to freedom, right? So the freedom to do what you want to do with your time, the freedom to pass down information to your children, to Mikhail's point, to pass down assets to your family. So having control over your time, control over your resources, and being able to dictate how you spend your days. That's really how I define wealth in the way a lot of our clients define wealth, and having that independence, that financial independence.
Gotcha. And James, you last on this particular question.
Yeah. And Tracy, I think what you're going to see is the three of us are all on the same page, right? Like if you take time to Google wealth, it comes back as an abundance of valuable possessions or money, right? But taking it a step further, it's access, it's opportunity, it's legacy, right? It's the ability to never say no, right, to the people you love. So think about that, right? It's we're at the age where our parents are aging. If our parents need long-term care, it's the ability to not say no to that, to be able to fund that. It's the ability to, if our kids get accepted into, the best private schools, being able to fund that. It's all those opportunities. My father used to say that, every generation should exceed what the previous one did, right? So it's that legacy piece. So it's about having the capacity to give our kids, our grandkids, that foundation to do that.
Right. All these was great answers. Leading into the third question, with the advent of technology and everything that's out there, investing is now easier than ever before. What are some of the recommendations that you would give to those who are thinking about investing during this time of economic uncertainty? And what are some key areas where people may consider making a bet? Keith, you can take this one first this time.
Yeah, sure. I don't like the term bet when it comes to managing people's, finances. We had a professor that used to get on us about, talking about betting, because as professionals, we don't bet. We make educated decisions on our clients' behalf. But when it comes to how you structure your portfolio, what you invest in, one of the things that we are really committed to is making sure that our clients' investment assets are aligned with their personal beliefs and their values. And a lot of people aren't aware that you can invest in the stock market, in other investments, in a manner that is consistent with your personal beliefs. So if it's your Christian values, if it's your values when it comes to racial equity, gender equality, you can build out a portfolio that is totally aligned with what those beliefs are. So that's usually one of the fundamental concepts we try to get across to our clients when we're having initial conversations, because usually they just think that you can, you're beholden to a certain lineup of funds and investments that don't necessarily have to be in line with what's important to you. So that's number one. And then these days, just given our views on the market, and where traditional asset classes are. So when I say traditional asset classes, mean stocks and bonds and things you can go and buy on the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ in your various custodial accounts. But we think that a lot of those asset classes are fairly pricey. So looking at alternative investments and maybe some private market non-traditional investments. Of course, making sure that you're making educated decisions, but that's an area that we think that a lot of people should be exploring right now.
Mikhail, how about you? Same question.
Yeah, I think Keith nailed it. But I would tell you that as you think about other sorts of investing, specifically if you think about small business as an opportunity to invest and create additional wealth, there's certainly some alignment to everything that Keith described as far as your values and the things that you believe are important. Within business, JP Morgan Chase, we have a group within our middle market team that's called Technology and Disruptive Commerce, which is really the space where we're thinking about the next wave of ideas and strategies that are going to impact the way that we do business. And so, thinking about personally the things that are important to you and where you're identifying that there are opportunities to change the way that we do business based on new technologies that you see or observe, or gaps that you believe you can identify that you can solve for based on previous work experience or just general ideas that you have. But it's also the simple concept that fundamentally, home ownership is a great investment. And home ownership does provide for the resources that are necessary. It's an asset that appreciates. It's also an asset that as you pay down, that value creates additional equity, which then gives you the opportunity to take advantage of additional opportunities in the marketplace. And so, the core of that also allows you to invest in small business. And so when you think about the fact that most small businesses are funded through friends and family assets and personal assets, it's not actually through small business lending, that we have to think about how we can accumulate those assets that we can then leverage to take advantage of those opportunities. And I think these gentlemen will do a great job of covering the investment side of the house.
James?
Yeah, so, Keith, Mikhail, both spot on. I think whenever you're talking about, and I received a lot of calls from, not only clients, but friends and family as well, like throughout this pandemic, those who didn't, they weren't financially affected by the shutdown, et cetera, right? Like, what should we invest in? Where should we put our money? And I think it all gets back down to, like, what are your goals? What are different things? What are different moving pieces in your life that you're trying to accomplish? And how do the different investment opportunities out here fit? So I think that it's first identifying what's important and what's your time frame too, right? How long can you afford to have your money sitting inside of an investment? Because that'll also dictate what you're investing in. A lot of times people assume that if we have a short window of time, like Mikhail mentioned, home ownership, right? So if we're saving up for a down payment on a home, and that's like a 24-month window where you're trying to accumulate that money, should you be saving aggressively? Yes. Should you be investing aggressively? Maybe not. Maybe you should be maybe you should be investing your money into safer assets, because when that time comes to purchase that house, that money needs to be there. And market volatility has an effect on your value, right? So if you have your money invested in aggressive assets, just like you can accumulate a large amount of growth in a short period of time, you can also incur a large loss in a short period of time. So just really being cognizant around, like, what your time horizon is, what your ultimate goals are, that really is what helps to dictate what your investment choices end up being.
Gotcha. Again, all great answers. Now I'm gonna throw a pivot in the questions before we lead to question number 4. The other night we had a great discussion around our responsibilities in our house, in our organizations, at work, and in the community. What do you think we as men should be doing in our house, in our organization, and in the community to make sure that we can inspire other people to begin to look at wealth differently and go after wealth as far as our daily lived experiences? We start with you again, Mikhail, first.
Yeah, so the Michael Jackson song "Man in the Mirror" comes to mind, right? I think that as we all observe the world and think about the world around us, we see a lot and believe a lot around what should be different. I believe, you know, it's a very simple notion that there's a sphere of influence that we all have. And it's an interesting notion to think about our responsibilities to influence that community that we're in. You know, for a period of time, I coached girls' high school basketball, and everyone was like, well, why aren't you coaching boys ball? Well, the reality is the girls team that I coached, most of those young women didn't have men in their lives that were great examples of what they should be thinking about as men, people that treat them with respect, treated them and showed value and appreciated what it is that they brought to the world, and also believed that there was more that they could give and continue to challenge them and raise the bar of expectation of what they should be able to deliver both on and off the court. And it's those types of decisions that we have to be willing to make that take us out of our normal day-to-day activities, that put us in places that challenge us, that are sometimes inconvenient. You know, Keith talked a little bit about time and how we prioritize our time. We also at Chase have a mentorship program for young men of color that are at that high school age. And so mentoring them and giving them the ideas around what they should be doing in preparation for going off to college and even in college, right? And so the last thing I'll tell you is my son is off at college now. He's actually going to graduate this year, but when he was here at home, you know, I cut hair in college to get by. But when he was in high school, I cut him and his friends' hair on Saturdays, right? And so I get, you know, 10 guys around the house on a Saturday. We watch college basketball, we watch college football, and they'd be sitting around. My wife would prepare a meal for them. It was just a chance to keep, you know, these young men close to you, talk about what they're doing in school, talking about what they're doing. You hear them talking about the young ladies, and sometimes you just kind of, you know, put a plug in their ear to make sure that they're showing respect and doing things the way they need to be doing. We have a role and can play a significant role in the world that we're in. And then it also is, as they get older, stay connected to them. As they go off to college, stay connected. You know, believe in them, pray for them, encourage them that they can do more and be more than what they may have seen in other places in their lives. Like, that is the role that as men, we have a responsibility to play. And it's a true honor to be able to see when those young men get older, that they come back to you and tell you about those stories and the impact that you had and the influence that you made over them. And that's what it's all about. And then that also turns into, you know, our financial decisions. And it also turns into the workplace, because now I get to go to work and tell the stories about these young kids with the lives that they have, the impact that they get to have on this world, and then continue to mirror that and change the expectation of what folks are seeing from us from a corporate American experience or others.
Absolutely. James, man.
Yeah.
You got to go after that. I know we spent the other night talking about that.
Man.
You should have known I was going to try and get this in some way.
Yeah.
Next,
and,
brother.
You know, that's awesome, man. And, you know, that role model example that he just provided, that is so key, especially in our community, right? You know, generationally, we are, you know, we're several generations behind our counterparts, right? You know, if you look at the timeline from slavery to civil rights, et cetera, you know, we are far behind, you know, where our peers are. You know, in our discussion the other night, we were talking about how some of us are, if we're not first generation college, we may be second or third generation, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, speaking to the things that our counterparts talk to on a regular basis, I think it was in the last panel, Conrad was mentioning about having open dialogue around finances. You know, for some reason, you know, we're at times timid to do that. So having that transparency to talk about, you know, where we're at, where we're aspiring to be, and, you know, having that in a community setting, I think is key to really moving the needle, if you will, around generational wealth. So it starts with us in terms of, you know, the things that we're doing, the plans that we have in place, and sharing that knowledge with our peers, with our children. You know, it's not uncommon for my clients to bring their children into the office with them. And it's not because they don't have childcare, it's because they want them to see the things that they didn't see when they were their age. And I'm not talking about, you know, teenagers, I'm talking about 7, 8-year-olds, you know, 5-year-olds, you know, African-American families coming in to meet with me so that the children can see hey, these are the types of things you should be doing as an adult to take care for your family, to get that generational wealth component in place.
Keith, you up, brother?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you talk about inspiring the next generation, to me, it comes down to really one of the focal points should be they need to see it in order to believe that they can be it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been a central part of my giving back, is that when I was in undergrad, I started an investment club, right? So always just sharing your knowledge, particularly when it comes to finances, right? Because so many of us don't have those conversations, or didn't have those conversations around the kitchen table about money. And to be frank, us as Black men, we have to be more comfortable being vulnerable when it comes to having those conversations and putting the egos aside, and really being comfortable, being able to express ourselves, and maybe not having all the answers. And that's something that we as Black men really have struggled with. And it's something that comes up a lot in conversations that I have with clients and prospective clients. But that vulnerability allows you to get to the heart of the problem and get to the heart of the solution quicker and more efficiently. Personally, my outreach efforts, there aren't many Black certified financial planners, right? So there's like close to 90,000 certified financial planners out there, and 1.8%, I believe, are African American. So one of the things that I set out to do a few years ago was, how can I personally help more Black advisors who are candidates for the CFP exam actually obtain that credential, right? And that's me in my professional life at home, having the conversations with my daughters. My daughters play golf, right? So talking to them, spending that time, more than anything, as fathers, as husbands. Yes, we want to be providers and we want to do well financially, but that time piece is critical as well. To Mikhail's point, think about the time that he spent with those young women on the basketball court, and the impact that that's going to have in their lives. It's going to be, probably more beneficial and more impactful than somebody cutting them a check for a scholarship. So time is important, and how we spend it and how we devote it to the community, and also being intentional about, we all are constrained by time, right? So we don't have an infinite amount of time. So being thoughtful about how you're going to use your time, how you're going to direct it, and having a cohesive strategy around that, I think is important.
Got you. Well, we got about 3 minutes left, and I definitely wanted to hit on the fact that financial wealth isn't just about money, but also a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of people, and a wealth of relationships. So we got about 3 more minutes left, and we got 2 more questions to get through. So we're going to ask that you answer these really quick. Number 4, what are some strategies you encourage your clients to implement to manage their wealth or resources? We'll start with you on this one, Keith.
I touched on it a bit. So alternative investments is something that we're spending more time on. And just knowing that you can invest Black and still make money, invest in diverse managers, and invest in strategies that are helping the Black community. There are options out there where you can invest in Black businesses and earn attractive rates of return. So don't accept the answer that you can't invest in Black companies and invest in a way that's consistent with racial equity and not achieve strong financial returns.
Got you. James, about 45 seconds to a minute.
All right. I do a lot of consultation around taxes, right? It's one thing to strive for a rate of return. It's also another thing to be really cognizant about how you access your money and the implication of taxes, as your money's growing, as you make withdrawals. There's certain things that, we can do in our day-to-day that will save you, a substantial amount of taxes over time, from leveraging HSA accounts, 529 plans, Roth 401ks, things like that, things that we look over, when we're doing our open enrollment, right? And for the business owner piece, looking at non-traditional investments. So, everyone knows about like 401ks and things like that, IRAs, but looking at like non-qualified investments. So things that business owners can take advantage of that are, exclusive to them, really, that will have a substantial effect for them down the line, be it things such as like supplemental executive retirement plans, cash balance plans, defined contribution accounts. really, not to get into the weeds, but as business owners, people pour so much of themselves and their finances into their business over time that they have different special vehicles that will essentially allow them to catch up on the years missed of making contributions.
Gotcha.
So,
James, we got about one. I mean, I wish we could talk about this for the next 4 days, but we got about 1 more minute. So I want to hear from Mikhail before we close out.
Yeah, so I'll make it quick. I'm going to be specific to small business. Debt is a leverage to acquire assets, and you have to demonstrate capacity to repay debt to qualify for debt. Equity is leveraged to invest in a small business, can be something that is returned, but typically is returned through the impact of that equity investment over a period in time. And sometimes those two things are confused, but neither is to solve for a lack of capital. A lack of capital means that you've got to demonstrate the value that you can provide and then identify the resources that can be tapped in to solve for those issues.
Absolutely. Listen, these were all wonderful answers. The last question I kind of want to answer myself, so I'll take less than a minute. In my capacity at REDCO, what we do is, in our current role, we provide opportunities for people to open up businesses in what we call high potential areas. And the project that we're working on now is making sure that healthy minority-owned businesses get in some of the high impact corridors in the cities that have been traditionally neglected. So what all of you guys are saying, especially when it comes to credit, opening up businesses, being, present Black men in our communities in the work that we do. I often say that ignorance is loud, success needs to be louder. So I'm grateful that Natalie and the team put this together so that they could see us in all of our greatness and, be unapologetically Black and unapologetically successful. As you can see, I'm rocking the I voted sticker. So make sure everyone get out and vote. Hopefully by tomorrow,